This is the second video on how to build a deck for the group WorkCamp projects in Utah. In the first video, we built this much of the deck. We got the platform, the decking, and all the posts in place and the ledgers in place. In this video, we are going to build the stairs, and then in the third video, we will build these rails. So let's get started on the stairs. Basically, let's take a second and talk about the parts of the stairs. The stairs in this situation are going to run from the ledger that we just installed, and we're going to run them down to the ground, and we're going to let them sit on a couple of 2x6s, which are called sleepers. So we're gonna have to cut those sleepers, and then we have, if you'll notice, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 stringers, and then we'll have the decking that will go on top of each stair. So that's what we're going to do in this video. Now the stairs, in order to figure out how tall each stair is, you've got to measure the total height from the top of the deck down to the bottom of the ground where the sleeper is going to sit. So let's look at some of the dimensioning here. Now, the project you're working on, you may only have 20 inches or 25 inches, or you may have 50 inches from the top down, but in this example, from that very top edge of the decking all the way down to the bottom of our sleepers is going to be 42 inches. So we have to figure out how many steps we will need to basically step up 42 inches. Now, most stairs are between 6 and 8 inches tall. That's a comfortable height for most people to step. If you get any shorter than that, you'll stumble up the stairs and trip. And if you get any taller than that, it becomes very difficult to step up that high. So we want to make sure that we're somewhere between a 6 and an 8 inch height stair. In order to do that, you begin to divide 42 by the number of stairs that you think you might need, and until you get a number that ends up between 6 and 8. So in this case, if we divide, we think we're going to have 6 stairs, which is how many we have, and so we divide 42 by 6, and that gives us 7 inches. Now, more than likely you'll end up with 6.3 or 6.7 or 6.8, and you'll have to turn that decimal into inches and quarters of inch or eighths of an inch. And you need to make sure that this is very accurate, because if you get variations in your step heights, then you'll also trip as you're walking up and down the stairs. So make sure each of your step heights are the same height, and that you do the math right. Make sure you're finding a stair height, we're going to call that height the rise. Make sure that the rise is between 6 and 8 inches. In this case, we ended up with exactly 42 inches, so 6 divided by 42 or 42 divided by 6 is 7. So we're going to have 6 stairs with a rise of 7 inches each of them. Now you'll notice that we have our stringer, which is this part with all of the stairs, and we have 4 of them. We're going to cut 4. Our stringer that only has 5 steps on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then our 6th step is actually when we step up onto that deck. So we divided this whole height by 6, but when we cut our stringer, we're going to remember we only need 5 steps on it, because the 6th one is over here. Now the other thing you need to be aware of is your run. You have a run of 10 inches on every one of these stairs. That'll give you the right amount of space to put the composite decking on there as stair treads. And then the last thing we need to talk about is at the top, you actually want your run on the top of this set of stairs to be longer. This is kind of unique. If you've built stairs before, please take note of this, because this is a little weird. You're going to make the run on this 11.5 inches, and the reason for that is because our top step, it stops here, but our stringers are actually going to have to reach underneath that top ledger and lean up against the ledger we put underneath it, and so they're going to have an extra 1.5 inches of material in order to reach that ledger. So make sure you cut that top edge 1.5 inches. Also, when we are cutting our bottom stair, you'll notice that the the rise on this looks much taller here than it does here. And it's because we have to remove some material to account for our sleepers. So we're going to take 1.5 inches off for the sleepers. And then we'll also have to remove some material just off the bottom step to account for the height of the stair tread. So when we lay out our sleeper, we'll remove 2 3/4 inches. So 1.5 inches here and 1.25 inches for this. We'll remove it all from the bottom. And I'll show you that in just a minute. So let's go to the stringer layout. You should have 4 or 5 2x10s on site, or if you have a shorter stair, then you'll only have 2 2x10s, and you'll have to use half of them for the stringer. And then, so make sure you cut your stringer at an end, and then you'll take that stringer and trace it onto the material that's left. So be careful not to waste material. Think about how many stringers you're going to have before you start cutting. So, but basically, the best way to do this is to use a carpenter's square. And so we're going to make a set of stairs, and the rise is going to be 7 inches, and the run is going to be 10. So on our carpenter's square, if you will basically put the edge of the board, line it up with the 7-inch mark for your rise, and then over here, line the edge of the board up with the 10-inch mark for your run, and then take a pencil and trace that line. Then you will have drawn your first stair. Then you move your square down and repeat the process and draw out 5 stairs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and you'll want to draw this one with both lines on it 5. And then what I like to do when I'm done, I have a line here and I have a line here. Then I'll trace that line back this way, and that'll show me where the bottom of my stair should be. But remember, you're going to subtract off 2 3/4 inches. So you'll actually, once you have this straight line, then you'll measure this direction, 2 3/4 inches, and you'll draw another straight line, and you'll know that that's where you're going to cut for the bottom of your stairs. Also remember at the top of the stairs that when you draw this top step, you're going to add 1.5 inches to it, and then you just come square back this way and cut that off, and you'll have your stringer. When you cut this stringer out, be very, very careful to run your saw only right up to the end of your line. If you try to run your saw beyond that, because the blade is round, so if you cutting from the top, if you run it up to here, and then you cut this way and run it up to here, this piece of material is not going to fall loose because some of the stuff from the bottom didn't get cut. If you'll take a hammer and just kind of smack that, or even just with your hand, you can typically break that piece out, but it's going to leave a little chunk of wood in here, and you'll need to just get a wood chisel or a little saw and cut that out, a little jigsaw or something, and cut that out and clean the corner out. But you do not want to run your saw through that and cut much deeper, because when we're all done, really the only material we have that's going to hold up our whole stairs is this space between here and here, and you don't want to be cutting into it. So cut yourself a nice clean stringer. Once you've cut it, then I recommend that you lean that stringer, just the one stringer up, kind of set it in place. If you need to put a couple of boards down for your sleepers, and set it in place. Make sure the top of this looks level. Make sure it looks like you've cut this to the right length. If you haven't, get a hold of your weatherization helper and see if they can help you, or do your math again and figure out where you went wrong. So once you've got the stringer, and you're comfortable that it's the right length, then just lay it on the other material and trace it and cut that out. When you're done cutting all 4 of your stringers, lay them all together, make sure they all look very similar, and if you need to make any adjustments, you can make some adjustments with your saw before you put it all together. But cut out 4 stringers, make sure they're all uniform and they look great. And then also you want to cut out 2 sleepers. You're just going to cut 2 pieces of 2x6 that are 4 feet long, and you're going to put this layout on them. This layout should look familiar. It's the same 16-inch on center layout that we put on our ledgers when we were building the porch frame. So put that layout on the sleepers, and then you can assemble your stringers and your sleepers together. I've found I'll typically lay the stringers upside down and put those points right on the ground, and then I'll I'll put the sleepers on from down below, and I'll put these screws in. I'll usually start with one stringer here and then kind of work my way this way, or put both of these together and then put the two in the middle. Whatever works best for you. Make sure you have enough fasteners in the bottom of this to hold this assembly together tight. One of the things you want to bear in mind when you are putting this together is that that bottom stair is much thinner than the other stairs, so when you're running the screws up in there, you may not have a lot of material, and since the material's small, it could crack. So be very careful. If you notice this starts to crack, then you may want to pre-drill those holes, or decrease the number of fasteners that you're using so you don't split that bottom stair out. On your deck, now that you've got that assembly put together, you need to put your layout on the deck so that you can attach it there. Again, we're going to use that same 16-inch on center, and we're going to come down. Now, we don't have our decking on, we don't have our stair treads on the top, so we're going to measure from the underneath, just from the top of the deck frame, not from the top of the decking, but just from the deck frame down onto this ledger, and we want to come down that same distance. Our rise was 7 inches, so we're going to pull down 7 inches, and we're going to draw a line that's nice and level all the way across there. You'll want to come in 3.5 inches from the side, because this board is longer to accommodate for the post. And then you'll start your layout 16 inches on center. You'll know that you got your layout right if it lines up with the joists that you put on your deck. So make sure that all that looks good and is lined up before you start putting this together. And then when you're done, go ahead and put your stringers in place. And to fasten the stringers, you're actually going to run some screws in from behind into the stringers, and again, be careful not to split your stringers out. You've worked hard to build them. And that's it. Now you've got your stringers installed, you're ready. You can go ahead and put the decking on. When you put the decking on, it's the same process as up top, except this time you're going to put you're not going to start at the front. You'll take the first board, and push it to the back, push it right up against your stringers, install it, make sure it's flush on the ends, nice and clean, and then you'll use the same thing you did before to put the space between there, and then install your front board. Again, remember the spacing on your screws on the front board is going to be different than on the back, and your stairs should hang out a little bit and should look nice and clean. Now, you may want to hold off on the stair treads on the bottom until after you've set your posts, but that's up to you. And also remember, when you're running your stair treads in, you're running those screws in. If you start splitting stuff out, especially on this bottom stair, you may want to pre-drill or so that you don't split it out. The next step in this process is to dig some post holes. We're going to put some posts in right at the bottom, which is going to hold the handrail, and we want them to be very sturdy, so we're going to stick them in the ground about 18 inches. So you're going to dig some post holes that are at least 18 to 20 inches deep, and you want to make sure that they're wide enough that we can put the posts in and pour some concrete in there and make sure that this is a nice solid assembly. So dig your post holes under each of these front corners, and also you're going to dig a little trench that's going to go between the two post holes, because we want a little bit of concrete underneath your sleepers. Once you've got your post holes dug, go ahead and put the post in the holes. In this example, it looks like these are already cut to finish. You don't need to figure that out yet. Just run your posts wild, let them stick up in the air, and fasten them or connect them here with a couple of screws. Again, you've already run some screws through your sleepers up into this stringer, and you ran some screws down to put your stair tread on, so there's screws all over in here. If this was splitting out, make sure and pre-drill these holes so that you don't split it out anymore to hold this post together. So attach the post and make sure it's sticking down in your hole about 18 inches. And then we need to make sure the post is level, so we're gonna put some bracing up to hold the post level. There it is. Basically, you're going to brace from both directions so that the post can't tip further, backward or forward, or left to right. So we're going to put a post brace from down here up to the top, and as you do that, you'll level that post up this direction, and then you'll come around on this side and you'll run a post brace maybe from down here up here, and again you're going to level that, make sure it can't tip from side to side. Once you've done that, that post should be very solid. It's nice and level. Repeat the process on the other side, and now you've got temporary bracing to hold up your posts while you pour your concrete. Mix your concrete up according to the instructions on the bag. Make sure your holes aren't too big or too small. Make sure that you've got about the right amount of concrete for the size of holes, and go ahead and fill that up with concrete. If you need to find a little board to smooth the top out so that you have a somewhat decent looking finish. And then once the concrete has dried, you can remove those temporary braces, and this is what your deck should look like at this point. In the next video, we'll talk about how to cut